Coming up on the program, I'm going to be talking with Professor of History Brent Taylor here at West Kentucky Community and Technical College about the history of presidential assassinations and assassination attempts. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's no secret that in the 2024 presidential election cycle, there was an assassination attempt on President Donald Trump. And that made me think about the history of assassinations and assassination attempts of our U.S. presidents. There have been a number of them. And joining me to talk about that is West Kentucky Community and Technical College Professor of History, Brent Taylor. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Daniel.
How long has it been? Like a year, probably, man.
Maybe, but it always seems like just 5 minutes, though, once we get back on the set.
I'm always bugging you about something, whether it's this here or on WKMS for our history series there. We're always talking about history, and so I thought with that kind of so prominent during that election cycle, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, which we'll get to, I thought it was interesting. We have attempts going all the way back to Andrew Jackson, and there have been a number of successful assassinations as well, and we'll get to those too. But let's start with what do you think motivates an assassin to want to do this?
The number one thing seems to be unemployed.
Really?
If you go and look through there, it's always an unemployed mason worker or an unemployed this or that. So that is a common denominator. If you don't want to be accused of this, get a job.
Well, it says a lot about, if you're unemployed and you're angry and you're motivated, you might try to take it out on someone. And, I think the symbolic leader of government here, even though we're a republic, is the president. People probably don't think of the 535 members of Congress as being the doers based on news headlines sometimes.
Yeah, figurehead.
Yeah.
So, ceremonial, but also does the real stuff too. And so all that, you see the dual executives in Europe or something, it's all focused on the president here.
And also, it seems to me that it's also about fame sometimes, as we've seen as well. So let's just jump right in. So Andrew Jackson was the first one, and there's no doubt that Andrew Jackson's always looking for a fight. I know he was a judge at one time who used to go out and catch people who were escaping bond or court. And I know there was an occasion where the criminal was shooting back, but he didn't shoot at Andrew Jackson because he said he had shoot in his eyes. He was willing to do it, and he didn't think the other people were.
Well, Jackson's a whole different breed. I mean, you look back at the different types of fights that he got into and all this, and I always put it this way, that Jackson has enemies that he doesn't even know that he has. And that's, in that case, Richard Lawrence fits the bill perfectly.
Yeah, walk me through what happened to him.
So first of all, with Richard Lawrence, he does not live in the world that you and I live in. He lives in a pretend world.
No, okay.
And in that world, he believes that he is the rightful heir to the British throne.
I see. That complicates matters with lots of people, but George especially, I suppose.
And so the whole thing was he blamed Andrew Jackson as the reason why he did not inherit the throne when he was supposed to.
How is that even possible?
It's not even close to possible. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, he was the hero of the War of 1812, the Battle of New Orleans. I suppose we're not British subjects, so maybe that was in the way. But
yeah. If you take it all the way back, right? If only the Second War for Independence would have been lost, then somehow or another he could have got back in the pipeline.
So how did he try to get him?
Well, first about the presidents. They are public figures. They campaign. They go to all these meetings. We know ahead of time what their schedule is and everything. It's
crowd building, right? So you always got to. In my work before I do what I do now, I worked in politics, and if you had a campaign rally and there wasn't anybody there, somebody's in trouble. So you always want the public there.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. And so he just shows up where Jackson's going to be, and he was behind a column like a pillar. And he pops out from behind the pillar with 2 guns. And I guess if you have mental health issues, you're not so great at gun maintenance because he pulls both triggers, click, click,
Uh-oh.
no boom.
That's bad. That's not what you wanted.
Yeah, so he's just standing there. Now, had this been modern,
They would have tackled him.
sure, Jackson would be at the bottom of a rugby pile and all this. But in this era, Jackson just goes straight for the guy.
Oh, he pursues him. He's just like, I'm going to get you now. You're
Yeah,
gonna kill me.
and he did not have a gun on him, but he had a cane. And he started to beat Richard Lawrence with this cane. And they had to pull the president off the assassin.
Can you imagine that in a modern headline? Just like the president of the United States beating up someone that tried to kill him. I mean, they're winning re-election or the election no matter what, right? The American public's going for that.
Either that or they'd get the sympathy vote for Richard Lawrence. Poor guy, can you believe what the president did to him?
He assaulted him and it was so bad. Yeah, but the guy tried to kill him. He had 2 guns. So it's not, they didn't work, thankfully, for Jackson's sake. Well, so what ended up happening to Lawrence? Does he get killed?
He was one of the very first cases of using the insanity plea.
Oh, really?
In a high-profile case.
Did he get out of being...
He went to a mental institution in D.C. for quite some time. I'm not sure how long the sentence was, though.
Next, I want to get to Zachary Taylor. Now, Zachary Taylor, sort of explain the timeline of when this guy was president. He's kind of a pre-Civil War, like, he sees it coming. He's trying to figure out a way to stop it, basically. And then he has a kind of, I don't know that you'd call it an assassination, but I qualified it here because it's an unusual way to go, for sure.
Right. Well, this is the 1840s. Like you say, the Civil War issues are heating up. He was about the last of the candidates in that era to win a non-sectional election, meaning that he had support all over the country. He died, though, under fairly mysterious circumstances.
Yeah, tell me about that. There was one rumor that he'd been poisoned, right?
Yes. So the theory was that he was not pro-slave enough. And so the pro-slave people came in and had him poisoned with arsenic. This was the theory that came around about the 1990s. And so we actually dug him up to find out.
What did they find out?
They found no arsenic. And so we default back to the original diagnosis, which was gastrointestinal troubles.
Okay, and that, I mean, Lord knows, if anyone knows that can kill someone, I am very well aware. I had a near-death experience related to gastrointestinal issues. So it can definitely kill you. So what was it that they said that was the cause of that? Didn't they say something about he ate cherries or drank milk or something?
Yeah, so it's a bowl full of cherries and a glass of milk. And so we know that those kind of products can sometimes have difficulties with bacteria and whatever, so maybe something like that is kind of what ultimately was the cause.
The amount of time something's left out, I suppose, could, like you don't want to leave milk out for any extended period of time, honestly. I'm always worried about that stuff anyway, and at that time, refrigeration wasn't the same as it is now.
You have no refrigeration, no freezing, it's just, here's the milk, and you take your chances.
So why would the Confederates, what was his position, just out of curiosity, that would have made the Confederates not like him?
I believe in that case it was one of these nuanced things about extension of slavery into the territories. That was later on one of the big issues with Lincoln and everything. I think it's that same sort of stuff.
It's the Henry Clay era compromise kind of thing, right?
That had been carrying the day through about 1850. And so this theory was that they were kind of like on the cutting edge of that not being enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's get to the one that everybody knows, the first successful assassination attempt, which is Abraham Lincoln. The Civil War's coming to an end. You had surrender at Appomattox Courthouse already. The war is over, but it wasn't for some people. And so you had Booth, of course, who successfully assassinated him at the theater. So kind of set the scene for, it was an unexpected event. I mean, no assassination is expected, but this particularly at that moment, such a what if scenario moment if he had lived kind of thing.
Oh, right. I mean, that part of it alone, maybe Reconstruction would have gone
What
differently.
did it look like? Yeah.
He was a pretty strong leader in Reconstruction, also wanted to be forgiving about Reconstruction.
Maybe a little more moderate than your Thaddeus Stevens type.
Way more moderate. They're all in the radical Republican camp, and we always consider Lincoln a moderate Republican, or Northern moderate. And so, right, the whole thing was maybe you get a kinder, gentler, easier path back into the Union and all this stuff, which is what he wanted.
And by assassinating him, they basically took that away.
That's the ironic part. Because if you're pro-South and the South is not going to rise again, which was kind of the theory behind killing him and Seward, and they had a whole hit list.
Johnson too, yeah.
Yes, you take out all the heads, and then without the heads, then they're in chaos, and then the South can rise again. That was kind of the theory. But barring that, which was a definite long shot, it's ironic. Because Lincoln, in some ways, was the best friend of reconciliation.
Because he tamed the radical Republicans like Stevens, got them to come to the table, hopefully, I suppose. Wow, that's very interesting. So what did Booth do? Is it a theater in D.C., right? Ford's Theater.
Yeah, so it's not even suspicious that a famous actor is at a theater.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. There's not even a red flag.
Because John Wilkes Booth is an actor, yeah.
And then he got past Lincoln's one inept guard. So
One security guard.
Yeah, and it turns out that the guy had not had a great track record in the past either.
Lord, okay.
It's kind of like failing your way to the top. I don't know how he managed this.
He really accomplished the win, I suppose you could say.
Well, yeah, if you wanted to be the worst of all time,
Yeah.
he had it in the bag for sure. And so there he is, no guard around, and just blew the president away.
So Lincoln's just in like a viewing box, and then Booth comes in. He has like a Derringer-style pistol or something?
Yeah, it's a small handgun.
Like a single shot.
And it's like you say, it's a upstairs theater seat. It's kind of like a luxury skybox in today's sporting venues.
Yeah.
And that was just it.
And I will say though, in terms of Booth assassinating Lincoln, it's kind of cinematic what he does, because doesn't he shoot him and then jump out of the gallery and like ride the curtain down to the stage and?
Oh yeah, D.W. Griffith has a scene like this in one of his movies where it's about Lincoln, and of course that's one of the big scenes in it is the assassination, and it was made for the movies because he jumps down, breaks his ankle in doing it, and then yells out "Sic semper tyrannis." That's what tyrants get.
Yeah.
Thus always to tyrants.
And then runs away, and then they like don't catch him right away.
Died in the manhunt.
In fact, isn't it true that like there was then for a moment like confusion of who was in charge of the country, because like Edwin Stanton, who was the war secretary, it's like, I'm in charge, and then they go get Johnson, and he's like injured or asleep or something, right?
Always in that era, there's a disagreement about that succession. Mm-hmm. So is the new president the president? Is he an interim sort of tag? I mean, what is it? And so that is something that has to be worked out.
Yeah, and then they go on a national manhunt, right? So how do they do it? Do they close the borders off and look for him that way? What ends up happening with Booth? He's probably trying to get to Virginia, right, or south.
I guess just away, right? Just away down south in Dixie. But he leaves, and they're in pursuit of him, and then eventually they close in on him. I believe he's in a barn, and there's kind of like this blaze of glory moment there at the end.
Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid style, yes. And then Lincoln's assassination obviously reverberates not just in the United States but around the world. How much did that assassination change things? Because I think in terms of people today probably don't think presidents can get assassinated. They probably thought that too, or who would want to do it?
McKinley thought that actually. So that's kind of like the next big stop, right?
Yeah.
So he in fact said his security team was worried about the event that he was going to go to.
Did they have more security after that?
It's much better than it was, and he was going to do a meet and greet. So you've done the political game.
yeah.
You've seen these meet and greets.
Yep.
They do seem extraordinarily dangerous.
Because you're just wandering out there with random people. I mean, it's the risk you take is part of it, though.
Yeah, for sure.
You're trying to get votes.
And it's a big crowd because it's a big event and the whole thing. And they tried to warn him. They were like, "Sir, this is a little risky, even by our security
Isn't
standards."
he just like, who would want to shoot me?
That was the direct quote. Who would want to shoot me?
And then, just a few minutes later, he was assassinated?
Probably a little longer than that, but in the great timeline
Yeah.
of things, it's not long afterwards, because they get in there, they do the event, and here comes this guy with a bandage on his hand. This is Leon Czolgosz, going to come up to shake the president's hand, except underneath the bandage is the gun.
Ooh, that's really sneaky.
Oh, it's awful. And he just opens up on the president right there, point blank, not much they can do about it.
And he's done at that point. I mean, once you've had a gunshot or two in you, it's hard to recover.
Yeah, he
especially
lived
then.
for a little while, and there was some hope that he was going to recover. It was actually kind of similar to the Taylor case, because he lived for a while as well after that initial trouble. But then just eventually took a downturn, and that was it.
Who would want to shoot me, he said. And then, well, somebody, obviously. But did they say there was any motivation behind that?
So in the case of Czolgosz, he was one of these guys, like we said, in and out of a job. And during his leisure time, he had begun going to anarchist rallies. So the anarchists at that time, they want to get rid of all the power structure. They want to get rid of any kind of popes, kings, presidents, big CEOs.
So yeah, it's the get rid of it's the top of the food chain. If we can take it out at the top, we can intimidate the rest of the structure, so to speak.
Yeah, and then they're going to have like a big reset button on society.
Well, that seems really unrealistic because it never goes the way people think it's gonna.
Correct.
And then, of course, James A. Garfield died as well. He was killed in office, was he not?
Yeah, Garfield. So in that case, the assassin's name is Guiteau.
Okay.
And he's another one like Richard Lawrence. So some of these are political, like with Czolgosz. In the case of Guiteau, though, he doesn't live in the world you live in.
Okay.
Same sort of thing.
And obviously mental health has a lot to play early on in this. Maybe they don't know that's what that is at the time,
Well, sure. I mean, something's off, but whatever. And there are red flags that are missed. So in his case, he believed that he was part of the inside crowd in the Republican Party.
Okay.
He believed he was like a real insider. All those guys know him, and he knows them.
Was he involved at all?
He was not.
Okay.
He also claimed to be a theologian. He wasn't. He claimed to be a lawyer. He wasn't. I mean, it was like everything that he
forming here, yeah.
Yeah, everything he thought was not real. It was all pretend. And being a member of the inside Republican Party, whenever Garfield won, he was going to get an awesome new job as an ambassador to maybe France or someplace like that.
He willed that on himself, did he?
Well, right, because as an insider, he's earned this. That's his place for supporting the president.
Nice. I don't even know where to start with this.
It's pretty wild.
Man,
it's pretty wild.
I'm going to do that next time. I'm going to will myself a job.
I mean, if he could manifest it, he would have done it for sure.
He was trying, yeah.
Yeah, so this is the whole thing. He decides that too much time has elapsed.
For the appointment, naturally.
He didn't get the appointment.
Yeah.
Other people are getting the appointments that he wants, and all these sees it, the news headlines
This is
and whatever.
problematic, yes.
Well, right, because he deserved that job. He had that job coming to him.
So
it dawns on him.
revenge time.
Well, right, because, and actually, we don't want to be too hard on him, because that's actually in the note that he carries this little note in his pocket.
Okay.
Describing
Sure.
that he killed the president, but he had done it in a humane way
Okay.
because he wanted him to go as easily as possible. His death was a political necessity, it says in the note. Meaning that he didn't get the job and he's going to get the job.
What?
Because if you give the next president his job, surely
He'll pay back the. Oh my goodness.
he's got to give you your job. Right. This is the
just so
Godot
much wrong with
story.
this.
And like you said, didn't turn out that way.
That is just. Oh man.
But the red flag that got missed, he had borrowed $10 to go to a gun store. And he's in there looking at the guns. People always say, well, weren't there any signs? He's looking at these guns, and he's looking at this one that's got a pearl handle, which is kind of like an expensive, unnecessary upgrade.
Yeah.
The clerk tries to help him out and says, hey, I've got another model over here.
Pretty
Not
cool.
that, yeah, I mean, it shoots great and whatever, not this expensive. Guiteau tells him, no, this one will look better in the museum.
Whoa. Whoa.
And that's just one of those things that, oh, that was weird, and you go on.
He knew that he was shooting the president of the United States, which was an iconic leader, our head of state, of course. And so, I mean, I think he understood the consequences of what he was doing, it turns out, maybe. I don't know.
That would demonstrate that if you were looking for something in court, right?
Yeah, right. And then that leads me to one of my favorite stories of all time about, the unfortunate realities of political assassinations is Teddy Roosevelt. Man, that guy, the persistence that he has, the stamina, he's so impressive, and especially with this story. So set the scene there.
Well, there's a reason why he's legendary, and this is part
An
of the legend.
asthmatic fighter of the Spanish-American War, it's amazing.
Yeah, so the whole thing, and in this case, he's trying to make a great political comeback. He had served part of McKinley's term. He had served a term on his own. Then there was an argument about, well, does that count for the 2 terms or not? And so he eventually kind of succumbed to that pressure and said, okay, that's the 2 terms. Mm-hmm. But then later said, hey, I never said I wouldn't run for a 3rd term afterwards.
Yeah, right. Non-consecutive.
Yeah, non-consecutive. And so that could be kind of like a loophole to the old 2-term tradition before the rule was in place. Well, okay, so people are not always very happy with that.
So this is 1912?
This would be the 12 cycle. And he's on his way to make a big speech. Open top car. You've seen that story somewhere before.
Yeah, you'd think we'd learn from this one.
But no. And so this guy is John Schrank, and opens up, hits the president, and in true Teddy Roosevelt fashion, just took it.
Yeah.
The people in the car trying to get him to go to the hospital, he's like, no, I got to go to the speech.
Yeah, and it was the speech that partially saved his life. He had the speech folded up in his breast pocket here. And like the bullet went through. It still went through it, but I guess it slowed it down enough to not.
Right, yeah. So his pocket's just jammed full of that, and he's got an eyeglass case in there. So the bullet basically hits everything but what it's supposed to.
He's just like, no, gang. I fought the Spanish-American War, been president. We're doing this again. I'm not waiting. We're going to go on and do the speech. Yeah. So even with a bullet wound, he still goes on and gives a political campaign speech, which, as in Teddy Roosevelt's time with no TV, they could last hours, right?
Right, and his team was worried about that too.
Because the speech is if a speech is big enough to put in your breast pocket that it stops a bullet from shooting you, it's a long speech.
Right, that's the whole thing. And his second line was he let the crowd know that he'd been shot on the way there. And then he said, it takes more than that to stop a bull moose.
That's a pretty good campaign slogan, so... he wasn't the only Roosevelt to have an assassination attempt. In fact, this next one, Franklin Roosevelt, this one really could have changed the trajectory of history again, much like Lincoln before, if it had been successful, right? Because this was late 30s, going into the 3rd term, right?
So FDR, we know, is a gigantic figure.
One of the most iconic presidents, beloved still to this day.
He's kind of like the godfather of the modern Democratic Party.
He's the reason that there's the 2-term limit is because he was elected 4 times.
Yeah, he was president for life.
Yeah,
and so then we had to think, well, what about the 2-term tradition? Let's put that in writing and say, instead of gentlemen.
The Constitution.
Yeah. Exactly. So definitely pretty impactful there. In his case, Giuseppe Zangara is the assassin, and got pretty close. And in fact, he hit the mayor of Chicago and killed him. So, you know, just
Was it a Daley by chance? Just because there are so many Daley mayors.
No, he's not a Daley. So he predated those guys.
Sorry.
Yeah. Anton Cermak, I believe, is the mayor's name. But yeah, that was a fatal wound for him. So definitely this was close enough to count as far as being a really serious attempt.
And you know, but Roosevelt, was he himself struck?
Unscathed.
Unscathed, but probably
luck of the draw.
Super close. And if that had been successful, you know, the question then becomes, what's the future of that term look like? You know, who would have run in his place, and what might have happened?
Do you go down the list of vice presidents that FDR had?
It'd been Wallace at that point.
Yeah. So I mean and then that's a whole different kettle of fish, because he was controversial
as being pretty far left, even more than Roosevelt too.
Right. So who knows if he could have even won? Maybe the Republicans get back on track early.
And there had been concern about some anti-Semitic folks that wanted to run too, which could have changed the trajectory of maybe World War II as well.
Oh yeah, you open that Pandora's box, you don't know what you're going to get.
There had been discussion of, like, you know, some iconic people like Charles Lindbergh, who'd even thought about running in 1940, that didn't.
Right, he had the name recognition that he could have.
Because of his flights and of course the kidnapping too, right? And then moving on, I guess, you know, in the last century, in anybody's lifetime today, the one that people remember is John F. Kennedy in '63 in Dallas. He's campaigning for re-election, looking forward to the '64 campaign. He's riding high because the Cuban Missile Crisis had just happened. And, you know, him and Khrushchev together sort of saved the world from the brink. And then a surprise happens.
Okay, right. So one thing about presidential politics, you give it 2 years and you're already in the next cycle. And that's really just not that very long. I mean, they're always campaigning. And so you're got to get back on the campaign trail. Texas was a swing state. He had kind of barely won Texas. There's some speculation that he didn't actually really win it. So I mean, it's going to be tight down in Texas, so you've got to get down there and campaign.
He was hoping that would help, maybe.
That's how you pick a running mate, right? You're balancing the ticket, because you're going to be a Northeastern guy, you balance it with a Texas guy, and you try to merge those two factions together. And so let's go down, campaign with the governor of Texas and all this. And so that was going to be the setup for all that. Just a campaign appearance, and
of course, you know, there's this assassination attempt is movie made, JFK, Oliver Stone, conspiracy theories abound us with what ifs and everything from Oswald being a Soviet assassin to a lone gunman, and the CIA involved, and how did all that sort of become the madness that it became?
So in the very beginning, if you look at this case, it has lone wolf written all over it up to a certain point. So okay, you're looking at Oswald as a potential lone wolf. Well, all right, with Oswald, is he kind of an unusual figure? Well, yes. All right, so you check that box. Is he an activist of some sort? Yes.
He'd been to the Soviet Union.
He had been to the Soviet Union in an era when no one had from America.
The wall had just come up like 2 years before.
So that's unusual. Married to a Russian woman, that's unusual.
It's just like red flags everywhere.
Yeah, the reddest of the red flags. That's true. Sure. He's checking every one of those boxes. Had some military experience, which would mean that he could handle a rifle.
Which he bought in the mail, by the way.
Mail order guns. What could go wrong?
They changed that law after that.
So yeah, he's checking every one of these boxes, and then it all happens. There's the manhunt. They catch him. the thing that opens the door to the conspiracies is Jack Ruby.
Because why on earth would a random guy be angry and then shoot the assassin a very short period of time in reality from the event? You're kind of cleaning it up, so to speak, is what the claim was, right?
It looks really bad. If you're going to be in the non-conspiracy camp, that one's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Because it's not the old 19th century where crowds killed perpetrators and whatever. That's not really the culture at that time. And plus, it had a little bit of time to kind of dissolve a little bit, and so it is very difficult to explain.
Did they ever express why Ruby did it?
As far as I know, Ruby shut up about it and never talked.
But it was just like, so they're transporting Oswald, the police are, through it's like a parking garage, right, or something.
Yeah, he's in custody.
And
the famous photo.
And Ruby just like pops out and just guns him down, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so that moment opens the door to all the questions about it.
You have the Hill, and then you have all that, and then the secret files that they didn't open to the public, which they're all these years later just now getting around to showing to the public.
Right.
And, I have made the joke many times that it would be amusing to me, and I know everybody wants to know, but it would be amusing to me if the files said, actually, we never did know who did it. But...
Well, they kind of do. I mean, I looked through about 100 pages of them, and there was a whole lot of talk about Cuba and all this stuff, and very little concrete. And I didn't look through the whole thing because it's a lot.
Yeah. Did they have any solid conclusions?
In the sections that I looked at, there was not really much there.
See, that's the thing about holding out all these files and everything is people have expectations of what it's going to be, and it's not. And then, of course, Lyndon Johnson goes on to become president, gets elected in '64 in his own right, and then Vietnam leads to him pulling out. And there isn't an assassination attempt until Gerald Ford, and I think a couple of people tried to shoot at Gerald Ford right after.
Yeah, I believe there was a 17-day span.
It was like the most. He came on top of the most unpopular time it was to be president. Richard Nixon had just resigned in August of '74 as in disgrace because of Watergate and the cover-up subsequently. So then, I guess it's kind of like, well, the presidents are evil now, so we need to get rid of them. Is that the mindset?
So these two seem a little more complicated. Maybe that second one I think fits the bill there. Mm-hmm. The first one is a little more specific, if the reason is to be believed. So that is Squeaky Fromm. And her stated reason for attempting to take out Ford was that she wanted to protect the environment.
Okay, I could think of other ways.
Oh, yeah, I guess it's not the most logical.
Maybe
but then again, when you're a member of the Manson family, you're not super logical.
I didn't know that. So she was a member of the Manson family who tried to assassinate the president.
Yeah, so it gets a little wacky on that one.
Mm-hmm. Was there, so her motivation was purely the environment? That was all she said?
That was the reason she gave.
Huh. Well, I guess he's lucky that he always fell down a lot, or so the media portrayed him as being. What about the other one? Was that one less clear?
That one is a little murkier. In her case, that is Sarah Jane Moore, and she said that she wanted to change the world.
I mean, that would do it, I suppose.
Technically, fact check, true.
But I could think of better ways to do it. I mean, it's obviously a criminal act and you're killing someone, but I mean, I don't know why she thought that was going to... I don't understand the mind of someone that thinks that by them perpetrating an act like that, it's somehow going to save the world or something.
Yeah.
But it goes back to that mental health issue thing.
Yeah, maybe something just deep-seated there.
And then, another one of the more serious ones since Kennedy probably was Ronald Reagan, right? He had just gotten elected. It was like 81 or so, and he had been shot, and they didn't know if he was going to make it.
What happened with him was, of course, he's surprised by it. He's coming out of a building, and he's got the Secret Service all around him and everything, got the entourage with him.
Mm-hmm. Which is better now.
Yeah. Oh, Secret Service
After
by
Kennedy.
the 80s.
Yeah.
is really serious. There's some photos that exist of this, and there's open briefcases. And on the inside of the briefcase, it's not papers, it's Uzis.
Yeah, right.
And like a holder where the
Submachine gun,
Uzi should
yeah.
be. So in that case, it's they're ready to respond, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
He got hit with a ricochet off of the presidential limo.
So hit the car.
Yeah, so they're trying to shove him into the car and all this stuff. It hit him in the side. He actually thought that they had just kind of pushed his ribs up against the door handle or something like that.
Felt sore, hurt a little bit.
Yeah, and it really wasn't until they got to looking more closely that they were like, oh, wait, this is serious.
We got to go to the hospital.
Yeah, and that they did directly take him to the hospital. That's credited with saving his life. Mm-hmm. Because had they delayed much longer, who knows?
And then that was the famous one where the Secretary of State goes into the press room and says, I'm in control here in the White House.
Alexander Haig.
And George Bush is on an airplane back from Texas. And if you're a country like the Soviet Union, you're wondering if there's a coup going on, probably, and something like that. Countries where that is where that would happen. You know.
And if you're the CIA director, maybe that goes through your mind a little faster. I don't know.
Because it's like, you know, when Yeltsin was taken out of power, it was like, he's not feeling well. Or not Yeltsin, but Gorbachev. When Gorbachev they tried to take him out of power, he was like, the premier's not feeling good. He's staying at home. We're in charge now. And it's like, if you're like that, you perceive other people to be like that, other countries.
Projection.
Yeah, exactly. And he survived. And wasn't the Brady bill, the gun control measure?
Yes, because that was the most serious injury that happened.
And there was a Secret Service agent got injured. And what did the Brady bill, was that an assault rifle bill, or was it just a gun control measure?
I don't remember the details of it, but it is definitely a reform coming out of that specific event.
Right. And then most recently, and there had been things in between, there was a gentleman that scaled the wall of the White House in the Obama administration, got past the Secret Service. Guy was texting his girlfriend on the phone, they said, and wasn't paying attention, and it was just like a perfect series of errors. And he got inside the White House and like went in the door, but it wasn't an assassination attempt. They got him, but we had things like that happen. People hit the gate, but never someone opening fire again until summer, fall of 2024's presidential election cycle. Donald Trump, who was president, of course, running for president again 4 years after his defeat in 2020, for whatever reason, I believe they said it was a registered Republican that did it. And I just find it interesting that all these years later, you have a charismatic guy like Reagan, or like Donald Trump, getting hit. What do you make of 30-year gap since Reagan, 40-year gap almost?
That's interesting, right? Because there do seem to be the gaps in between. I don't know if there's anything to it,
Kennedy,
or if it's just
Roosevelt.
Yeah. I mean, there's some sort of symmetry there. Maybe there's just part of the ebb and flow. It's hard to say, right?
Did they say what the motivation was behind that? Was that ever clear exactly from your knowledge?
The Butler, Pennsylvania one?
Yes.
I have not seen a lot about that. I think some of that is still being investigated even.
Well, it's, obviously politically motivated, because if you're ever shooting at the president,
clearly.
Politically motivated. And they said that he was up on top of like a structure with some kind of rifle with a scope. And the Secret Service may have dropped the ball on picking this up. That's what I remember from hearings and testimony.
They definitely missed something there, because I know that there were people in the crowd who saw that unfolding, and they were trying to get the attention of people who might be able to do something about it. Hey, there's a guy up there. There's a guy up there. And the response just wasn't forthcoming.
It's crazy, because in terms of modern day, you can just watch the president, he wasn't the president then, but the current president sort of talking, and then he touches the side of his head and he kind of goes down, the Secret Service jump on him. And, there's that famous photo where he comes up with his fist up that some newspaper reporter was just in the most magical moment in time capturing an image. Like, that's a photo of the century so far.
Oh, iconic.
Or since 9/11.
Yeah. 9/11, COVID, and that.
Yeah.
Those are the three.
And that most certainly, I would argue that went a long way in improving his political chances going into November, simply because anytime something like that happens, there's this patriotism that comes from it.
And it's sort of Teddy Rooseveltian, right?
It kind of was, because did he go on with the speech? Or?
He did not go on with the speech, but he did have the moment with the fist.
He went back to Pennsylvania.
Yes, he did, and very specifically kind of to finish what he had started.
Yeah, which I thought was very interesting. You're right, that is very Teddy Rooseveltian, so to speak.
If we're going to coin a term, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those things where, there's multiple assassination attempts, and I have a feeling that after the Secret Service is investigated and all the hearings take place, that hopefully it'll be another long period of time before anybody tries anything like that again. One would hope.
Maybe another 20 years on the clock.
Yeah, let's hope it's longer than that. But yes. But it's just fascinating, the reasons for people that would try to assassinate a president and a head of state, not to mention, civil rights leaders and everything else that we've seen over the years. So thank you so much for talking with me about all this. I know it's a complicated topic and difficult one, but it's just fascinating, the motivations behind it, how it happens, the kinds of things that come from it, and maybe people can learn from that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for coming. We'll talk again soon. We'll do it. I know we're going to be talking about the Civil War at some point too. So it's always a pleasure talking with you.
All right, you too. Thank you.
And that was my guest, Brent Taylor, professor of history at West Kentucky Community and Technical College. We were talking about presidential assassinations and assassination attempts. Heavy subject, but one that's terribly interesting. Thank you all for watching. Join us next time.